Well, hello. I am headed down Interstate 94. We have left we have left Bismarck, North Dakota. We're headed east. Not going to stop in any little towns till we get to Jamestown, North Dakota. So stand by for a whole bunch of this. Although we do go through some very interesting countryside, so it's not completely wasted. I don't enjoy driving on the interstate. I never enjoyed it in Pennsylvania. I don't enjoy it, well, in any state I've ever driven in, let alone North Dakota. But here it is. I, for whatever reason, decided to myself, you need to record this video on real time. I don't know why I did that. I'm sorry. But I'm sticking with it. Anyway, what inspired today's video, and probably the next, I'm estimating 3 videos, but I haven't recorded them yet, so I don't know, is my own school. Right at this exact moment, my school, yes, that's water on the right or the left of the interstate, and yes, it's that close to the level of the pavement. Right now, my school is struggling to fill its second science position. Yep, there are 2 of us. I teach 8th grade earth science, 9th grade physical science, physics, and a class called STEM. The other instructor covers 7th grade life science, 10th grade biology, chemistry, and a meteorology / geology class. And then we have another gentleman who, actually I took his job because he moved away and then moved back. He's now our tech coordinator. He teaches advanced biology and then does tech coordinator stuff the rest of his day. Now, the guy that teaches all the other science courses has chosen to move on to greener pastures. That's an issue I have some definite opinions about, because you might notice I haven't moved on to greener pastures for reasons that I might need to get into in one of these videos one of these days. But that's what he's chosen, so we need a new science teacher. And we've needed a new science teacher for months. Well, it's getting toward the beginning of school, and we still don't have one. Now, the guy that teaches the advanced biology could teach all the courses that this guy taught, except he's busy doing tech coordinator stuff. And since in this coming year we're going to be going to one-to-one technology, that's not a realistic option. He's going to need to be full-time tech coordinator dude. I think that illustrates one of the reasons why I'm not in administration, because, hey, not my problem to solve. Although I may end up suffering from this problem. Who knows? Maybe at the end of this coming year I'll be so frustrated I end up quitting. But, I'm going to go into the school year optimistic. Who knows? They may find a way to solve it. But what got me started on this video is that we're not the only school that's suffering with this problem. There are a lot of schools across North Dakota suffering with this problem. Well, I thought, okay, I've got out-of-state contacts. Because if you don't know, I'm from Pennsylvania originally. I went to college in Pennsylvania, graduated in Pennsylvania. So I thought, well, I will just call my college in Pennsylvania, see if they have any candidates. So, I've been out 20 years. Almost nobody in the education department there now is from when I was a student there, but I found one name I knew, so I contacted him. And he pretended he remembered me, which was really nice of him. But then he said, get as close as I can to my paraphrase here, about half as many students there are secondary education candidates as when I was a student there in the 1990s. There is a shortage of teacher candidates in Pennsylvania as well, so most candidates at my college are not looking for an out-of-state placement. But he said he would pass the information on just in case anybody was actually interested. So I got more curious about how widespread this problem actually is. It is getting to be a serious problem in North Dakota. My school, believe it or not, is one of the larger school districts. There are a lot of school districts in this state where you are the only one in your department, the only math teacher, the only science teacher, grades 7 through 12, the only one teaching your grade level in the elementary school, the only 4th grade teacher. Some schools, you even may have 2 or 3 grades in one classroom. We could start a conversation about whether some of these schools could be consolidated, but that's a different video, I think. And we've seen some of this, some of what's leading to this in other states. West Virginia, Arizona, Oklahoma, all those strikes there. That's over the conditions of teaching in those states. It's not just about salary either. There are a lot of other factors going into it. And that's really what I want to look at in this video. And I'm going to go beyond those 3 states. In fact, I'm probably not going to talk about them specifically very much, although I will put some interesting links about a few of them at the end of my at the end of my bibliography, just to give you a little bit extra information. But I found it interesting that for example, in West Virginia, the legislature finally caved and said, okay, we'll give you the wages, we'll just cut somewhere else. And teachers said, no, that's not what we're after. And kind of the same thing going on in the other strikes as well. It wasn't all about wages. Yes, making money is nice, but remember, teachers don't usually go into teaching expecting to get rich. We know it's not a high-pay profession. But there must be a reason, or a lot of reasons, why there is a shortage of teachers in this country. And it's growing even in states that pay well. So I want to look at what the problem is, how widespread it is, and just why aren't there teacher candidates, and finally look at a few solutions. And I want you to remember that when I talk about solutions, this problem was one that was a long time being created. It's not going to be solved overnight. We could next year say, well, we're going to pay all teachers $100,000 a year. Great, you'll get a lot of people into teaching then. But it's going to take a few years to get those candidates through college. And it may not be as effective as you like to think. So let's delve into it. So here's a fun little factoid. In the first 5 years of teaching, half of, and I'm one of them, by the way, half of teachers will either transfer schools or leave teachers. Leave teaching. And they will be replaced by new teachers who will do the exact same thing. This creates a revolving door, and it is worse in some locations than others, because that's one of the other issues we have to fight over. This isn't a universal problem. Some places have actually come up with solutions. But we know about the candidates more likely to drop out of teaching. Those would be students, teaching candidates, in other words, from top colleges and universities, as well as minorities. Now, my source didn't get into reasons why. Well, if you've seen my Penn videos, you know I really don't fit in any minority status. I won't say I came from a bad college, but definitely not one of the top tier colleges or universities. Grove City College, if you're interested. I'm just sort of middle of the road, so I don't really have anything too intelligent to offer there either. But I did find an article on the Colorado teacher shortage that illustrates some of what's going on. And Colorado is a very rural state, just like mine. It has its big cities, and it has some very wealthy areas. But it also has some very small schools, just like my own state. And what schools there are reporting is positions will go unfilled for years, especially in math or science and special education, which that's kind of a universal. And they estimate they need about 3,000 new teachers. In the state, teacher candidates have gone down 24.4% since 2012. And 1/3 of Colorado teachers are 55 or older, retirement age. Now Colorado is aware of the problem, and there is a House Bill 1003, which will direct the state to ID reasons for the shortage and how to retain teachers. I couldn't find much information about how that turned out, what they've discovered, and they may still be collecting data, but I was able to get some interesting things anyway. Nationwide, U.S. student enrollment in teacher programs has gone down by 35% between 2011 and 2016, and same general shortage areas as in Colorado. Now, like I said, certain schools struggle more than others. Schools that are high poverty, urban, and rural are the ones that are going to struggle the most with hiring and retention. And here was an interesting statistic, which is going to come up again several times throughout this series of videos. 8% of teachers leave teaching every year. Of those 8%, less than 1/3 are leaving for retirement reasons. Now, when you compare that to high-performing countries, the percentage is more like 3 to 4%. In fact, one of my sources is going to mention later on that if we could get down to that 3 to 4%, our problems generally would be solved, not necessarily in each locality, but overall would be solved as far as finding teachers. Another source I found was that 1975, hey, that's the year I was born, 1/5 of college students majored in education. By 2015, 1/10, which I actually was really surprised by that number. I honestly figured it would be a lot smaller. Now, there have been a few cultural changes since then. Women have shifted from being 32% to 11% of women in education over the last 40 years. Why? Because women have more options now. At one time, if you wanted to be a woman who was educated, I'm sorry, ladies, if this offends you, but this was the reality in the United States. Your options for professions were very limited, and teaching was one of the few that was open to you. That's the reality of the United States at that time. Now, this has created a few problems, this whole shortage thing. One of them is, overall, it costs schools $2.2 billion per year to deal with this churn. Now, I will concede that some administrators like turnover because a newer teacher is cheaper. But some research has found that it's not necessarily the teaching degree associated with better student performance, it's more experience. And I know you will hear the argument that we shouldn't be paying for years teaching, and more years teaching doesn't mean you're a better teacher, but overall, they have found that experience correlates with better student outcomes. And I would say that would match just about any profession. The more experience you have, the better you're going to be at it. And I know we can all point to those anecdotes, that old teacher that should have been out of the classroom years ago, but overall, and I know that's true in my own case, I'm a much better teacher now than I was when I started. Overall, it's the high poverty schools, which would be our most vulnerable, most needy students that are struggling the most with retention and hiring. And like I said, we have the supply if we reduce teacher attrition from 8% down to 3 to 4%. Again, locally we have some fine-tuning to do, but overall. And, I'll bring up the obvious question here. Without teachers, who do we put in our classrooms? Do we lower the requirements? Do we make it easier to go into teaching? Do we get people who are less qualified to run a classroom? Do we get people who walk into the classroom unprepared for the realities of teaching? I have seen some of them come into my own school. Most of them don't last because they really aren't prepared. I won't say education school is the greatest, because there are definitely some issues there, which would be another whole video. But putting untrained people in front of the classroom, especially the way U.S. education system is set up, you don't get a whole lot of mentoring or any help. You're just like, okay, here's your classroom, have fun, and don't screw up. And yeah, you get what you would expect there. People who have no concept of classroom management, have no concept of what are appropriate boundaries, how to even teach, how to present information, what information they should be presenting. You know, it's a recipe. Or do we want a more professional teacher force? In which case, we might have to do a few things. Now, I want to turn this discussion toward the reasons for the shortage. And I'm going to start with rural America because that's where I live. If I want to eat out in this town, and again, my town by North Dakota standards isn't that small. By national standards, it's a speck. But I don't have many choices. There's really nowhere to go out just to have fun, to hang out with people. I guess I could go to the bar, but I'm not a bar person. I don't, nothing against alcohol. I just don't really like bars. And a small town teacher, you probably shouldn't go to a bar. Going anywhere else is too far. There's not a lot of social venues here. Not a lot of people that share my interests. And a lot of the social life in a rural area is centered around families and couples. And where do I go? And, just look at the screen. I mean, it's running real time. This is the reality where I live. There's nothing here. Everything is far apart. And if I do go out, I am surrounded by, well, students, former students, their relatives, which isn't necessarily all bad either, because you get to know an area. Oh, my neighbor is running his lawnmower here. I may have to stop this for now. But there have to be other reasons, because like I said, it wasn't just rural areas that are suffering a teacher shortage. So the article on the Colorado teacher shortage repeats a lot of what I said. Basically that rural life is different. And it's a lot easier if you grew up with it. It talked about social isolation, a lack of amenities in small towns. It also mentioned the need for multiple certifications. When I was teaching in a school where I was the only science teacher, grades 7 through 12, I needed biology, I needed earth science, I needed physics, which I had, I needed chemistry. This larger school I'm at, I don't need quite as many degrees, but and you can't get that many degrees, speaking practically. So they have to find a way to get you multiple certified, and it's usually on you to figure out how to get certified for all those things. But that is a big deal. And 6 different classes in a day, which I used to teach, versus 4 different courses. That's a big difference. Just having 2 fewer courses to prepare for gives me a lot more free time. If I had 3 or 2 or 1, I could do a lot better job, and I would have more time overall. And I'm talking my own time, not work time. Same amount of work time, just there's a lot of prep work involved outside of the published hours for teaching. But another one that this article about Colorado brought up was the salary disparity. Now, I am going to trust the source, and that's why I put my bibliography down there. If you have better information, I'd love to hear it. But this article mentioned that the highest average salary is Boulder Valley with $63,000. Rural schools, and this one seemed really low to me, $22,700, and then the state average was $36,700. You will find the same thing in the state where I live, although it isn't quite as big of a difference. But you can make a lot more money teaching in a Fargo or a Bismarck, or go to the oil pumping areas like the Nesson School or Tioga. They'll pay more. There are some schools in the state with a relatively low base, but we're a lot closer together in this state than apparently Colorado is. And remember, there's some wealthy areas. Boulder is a wealthy area in Colorado. It's expensive to live there. And in fact, if your spouse isn't somehow employed in a high-paying job in that area, you may not even be able to live in your own school district. You may actually have to commute in from elsewhere, or a whole bunch of you teachers share an apartment just to make ends meet. But that's all side issue here. Let us move on. This same article mentioned a rural school which had been frozen. I guess it's base. I'm not clear on this. At $24,000 for 7 years. And we're talking Colorado, of course. Salaries are down 7.7% in the last decade. And it's one of 35 states where salaries have gone down. Now, part of that, of course, is due to just not getting a raise while inflation decreases the value of your money. I don't live in one of those 35 states. I live in one of the other 15 states where the salary has gone up. But when I started teaching, we weren't at the bottom nationwide. We were like second or third from the bottom. So, we've come a long way in North Dakota. State Senator, Colorado State Senator Mike... Oh, sorry. One other thing I guess I should mention there, I'm trying to make sense of my arrows, is that a new teacher can't pay off their college debt. Because remember, college debt is a reality here in the United States as well. A new teacher can't pay off that college debt even if they want to be rural. And legislators are afraid to spend to deal with that. My state has a program to help students pay off their debt, but only a certain number from each school district. And you may get the aid 1 year, but not the next year, which might be another topic for a video. So I'm going to quote Colorado State Senator Mike Merrifield. He was a 30-year teaching veteran. Teachers are constantly being bashed. It is not the same job it used to be. And I think there is actually something to that. That's actually a big piece of why there's a shortage. You've probably heard me make some sarcastic comments about how people don't value my job. Well, a 2013 poll of teacher job satisfaction showed it's down 23% from 2008. In other words, it went from 62% satisfied to 39% satisfied. Teacher's image is gone as a stable career. It's become a bitter, politicized environment. There's, especially in some states, a real loss of control. And I'm going to get into some of that later on in the video, but I'll give you the short version right now. You get your ideological wars, which we fought here in North Dakota too. Right-wing state, what do you expect? Over Common Core and testing. There's the loss of tenure, which admittedly we don't have in North Dakota. And then during the recession, there were a lot of budget cuts, which caused layoffs and changes to jobs and rapidly inflating classroom sizes. And then there's a PR problem. Teachers are an easy scapegoat. Listen to Rush Limbaugh or any conservative commentator talking about schools. None of it's good. There's a whole lot of take them out of schools and homeschool them because all public schools are trying to do is brainwash them and turn them into liberals. And I've heard that from people who know me personally that that's all schools want to do. Wake up! I read an article talked about a 25-year veteran. He actually teaches at a special school for at-risk students near Denver, and he's now leaving. What he said is, it's become a lot harder to teach, and especially to teach in a way that I think is personally meaningful for students. He talked about having to document and measure what's being taught. He talked about standardized lesson planning, a really specific, detailed lesson plan format. where you're spending a whole lot of time on paperwork rather than teaching. Now, the administrators will say it creates a high-quality classrooms and frees teachers to teach their way. But I want you to think about a small school where you don't have just one course you teach all day. Try having 6 different preps, and you have to do these detailed lesson plans. Or think of your special ed teachers and the enormous amount of time they spend on IEPs and writing them and crossing all their T's and dotting their I's. There's a lot of documentation in teaching that there wasn't. And, sure, analyzing test data is good. How much time is spent on that? Does the test even test what we say it's testing? Now, that's a whole video, too. I didn't write her name down for reasons, but if you really want to know, you can look at the reference, number 11. One prize-winning teacher advised, although she did come back and modify this slightly, but one prize-winning teacher advised new people, don't become a teacher. And her reasons were the Common Core and tests. Teachers are treated as technicians rather than professionals. There's too much test prep, and there's actually less reading and writing. And then there's these performance assessments for teachers where teachers don't even necessarily understand what they're being assessed on. I mean, we had to change our teacher evaluation system in where I teach, and there are a bunch of things on it, and just like this doesn't even apply to my situation, but I've got to be rated on them anyway. Now, some of the things, other things that were cited, just to give you some detail here, loss of autonomy in your classroom. And specifically, they brought up math teachers. Apparently, that's the most acute there. And, well, gee, why? Because math is one of the areas that our government has decided needs to be tested. So schools are starting to look for these teacher-proof programs. No matter what numbskull they put in front of the classroom, they'll be taught the same. For example, sex and math. I hate to throw a curriculum under the bus, but what a nightmare to try and teach from that if you have any creativity or any love for students at all. Readers and workbooks, if you're in the language arts. Not real books. Here's this pre-selected reader and all these workbooks with really detailed little questions. I hated that as a student. It sucked all the joy out of reading for me. And schools and teachers seem to view their curriculum choice as a savior. And it's not. It's your teachers that are the savior. Some of the sources I looked at talked about the recession as reasons for the downturn in teaching. And I mentioned this before, but I'll give you some detail. 2008 to 2012, California laid off or eliminated 80,000 teachers. Now, yes, some were rehired. California schools sometimes have a bad habit of laying off teachers and then waiting to see if they have the money to rehire them. And if they don't, then they're laid off. If they do, then they're hired back. Well, how often do you get a pink slip and then get rehired before you say, screw it? And of course, now that the recession is over, there are a lot more options professionally. Another thing that they found is that students who were exposed to higher unemployment when they were students tend to look for more lucrative careers. So, if dad and mom were laid off from their jobs, or your friends' parents were laid off from their jobs while they were students, they're going to have some financial insecurity, so they're going to look for a job that pays well. And of course, there's the salary thing, and I know this is the one that gets people worked up because they don't like paying teachers. They always, I could get into a rant about that too. But what we found nationwide, we're not doing a specific location here. Nationwide, teachers make about 20% less than other college graduates. And I know teachers don't go into it for the money. And I know the old argument that they only work 9 months of the year. But here's the thing. If you want to get people into the profession, what they're paid has to support middle-class living. In California, which, oh my God, this is quite the rent. The starting salary in Oakland in this source was $42,000. The average rent, this is what blew my mind, $28,002. I don't really want to give financial details on my house, on my life, but let's just say there are less digits in what I'm doing as a house payment on my 10-year mortgage than the rent there. This is more of a local thing, and thankfully I don't live in one of these states, although it was the reason I chose not to go to one specific state. There are over 1 million teachers in this country who cannot collect Social Security. There's 15 states like that. Kentucky was one of them. And you might remember some striking in Kentucky also over pension. Because what those states are supposed to do is guarantee an equivalent pension to what they're losing in Social Security. But many states like Kentucky have underfunded that pension. And now Kentucky's trying to make changes to that pension. And with what we have in power in our federal government right now, that's scary for a teacher. And salary, it may not be the only problem, but it is important. And remember, salary is a local thing. It's not just state by state. One of my sources here gives what your salary is equivalent to based on your state expenses, I guess. But, even within one state, there's wide variability. The oil boom here in North Dakota kicked people out of some areas. As rent shot up in certain areas, like Williston, people on a fixed income or on a lower income were forced to leave because they couldn't afford to live there. That included teachers. Now you might say, well, why should teachers be immune? And I'd say, well, we are a service that the government is expected to provide. Same as police officers. Some towns have gotten creative and they've had to do things like create housing. I was reading, and I didn't write this reference down and I'm sorry, but I was reading about some schools in Florida, multi-floor buildings, are actually building teacher housing in one level of these schools. Killdeer, North Dakota, purchased an apartment building specifically for their teachers. I worked in a school district a few years ago, 13 years ago? 14 years ago, something like that, where they actually owned two houses. And I hate to say this, but people who say teachers are overpaid, I don't see a stampede, because I just got through ranting about it. I don't see a stampede of people trying to get into these cushy teaching jobs. They're all that great. Why aren't people trying to get into them? So the real question would be, what is to be done? And I think that is where I need to pick up next week. So I will just close saying that, no, it isn't just salary. There's a lot more going on here than salary. There is the ability to be a professional. There's respect, not just from students, but from parents, community members, media, other professionals. And you need to be able to make a living. As a teacher, you're not going to be rich, but you need to be able to make a decent living, or why would you go into it? And it's not like the old days when, women can't work all these jobs, so we'll let the little ladies take care of the teaching jobs, because no, nowadays women have options. But solving this teacher shortage problem is going to cost money, and people don't like to do that. And there's that convenience of teachers being a scapegoat for every social ill, because we're expected to solve every social ill. But I will pick all this up in the next video, which hopefully will be next weekend.